What's up guys, John here. I had a thought that I think is pretty interesting. I'd be curious to see whether or not y'all think it's interesting. And this is a software developer's explanation of the Trinity, and it's actually surprisingly highly technical. It's not very abstract. This does not sound anything like what a philosopher or a theologian might say. It's going to be in the vocabulary of software development. And I stumbled onto this because I was thinking about integrating Mechanical Turk and Cognito. So I have a system and I have users, and these users have to execute certain tasks. And so far this system has been executing tasks with our own in-house users at our company. But we'd kind of like to get some crowd users in to execute some of the kind of grunt work. And so that's what Mechanical Turk is for, right? Crowd. And so I'm gonna kind of assume some familiarity, but I guess I can give some background on what these services are, but it's not even near comprehensive. Cognito is an authentication management system. It doesn't do anything standalone. It's meant to be integrated usually to your own application or to another AWS service, like maybe a Lambda function, could validate against some user. And then, you know, these are Amazon Web Services, AWS, and again, hopefully you're familiar, but in principle, Lambda could, an entire API could be driven off Lambda, or an entire website, including the front end, and that's called a serverless architecture. And you can just visit a website like www.whatever.com, and it could respond with like hello guest, and that's just like a generic string that the Lambda is serving. But you could integrate it to Cognito and you would have users. So I log in, get a JW token, and now the Lambda is aware that it's me, and instead of hello guest, it says hello John. And that's what Cognito can do. So Mechanical Turk has users as well, but Mechanical Turk can be done in a standalone fashion. You can log into Mechanical Turk. So they have their own user data that's separate. And from a database architecture perspective and from a systems perspective, it's separate. So I want to integrate them though. And so thinking about this, how do we integrate them? Well, somebody might think that you could have a super user table where there's a row for John and there are columns for Cognito data and for Mechanical Turk data and for whatever other logic or like data I might have for my own application that's specific to my own application that has nothing to do with those services. But immediately, anyone who's familiar with proper database architecture would recognize that that's, first of all, an awful architecture, and second of all, it's not workable because I don't have access to those internal databases of Cognito and of Mechanical Turk. What I should do instead is I should have my own application with a table, perhaps a user table or roles table or permissions table, something like that, and have primary and foreign keys which relate it to Cognito users. And from a Cognito perspective, there are user pools. There is such a thing as a Cognito user with a Cognito data, and it has like password and whatever else we're going to store over there. Why are we using Cognito? It can handle password management. It's like a big deal. Then there's Mechanical Turk with its own user data. And there's such a thing as a Mechanical Turk user, and there's a completely different database over there. So you can integrate the services, but they're technically different databases, let alone different tables. So what you really have here is you have 2 or 3 databases, or at least 2 or 3 database tables, and they're all going to relate to each other, primary and foreign keys. So abstractly, there is a user John, and he has this password X that's over in Cognito, and he has this application metadata that's in my database, in the application database. Maybe that's an RDS or something like that. And then he's done these tasks, HIT hits. He's done those are associated over in Mechanical Turk. So abstractly, there is one John but it's technically a super object of all of these metadata from each data source. And then you can speak particularly of this user table, this Cognito user John, this Mechanical Turk user John, and this John's application user John, which are technically their own entities, their own business models with their own properties, right? So the person, Cognito John, is different from the person at an entity level, different from the person, Mechanical Turk John. They're related but different. And then they all cohere in one super user John that requires integration across the three. There's a sense in which you can speak about the primary application server, John's application. That user table, in a sense, is the controller or the parent in a hierarchical relation to all three. But in another sense, it's very limited, and at least from my application's perspective, I don't know if this works theologically, but from my application's perspective, it just doesn't work if you use it by itself. You need Cognito, you need to log in, at least in the context of my application. And then from a user perspective, it's a useless piece of software without the Mechanical Turk integration, because how are the crowd users going to get paid? The crowd user can't get paid. So even if you have my application data and then you have the Cognito data, and in principle they can log into the software, why would this crowd user ever log into my software? At the end of the day, they're not going to be able to get credit for the task that they did, that HIT, and they're not going to be able to get paid at the end of the day. So they really have no need for my software unless all three components simultaneously coexist, relate to each other, and are in operation. So there's a way in which the primary application database is kind of the controller or the parent, but there's another way in which like all three need to coexist for the whole system to work. And I think I don't want to over rely on that as like a crystallization of theology, but I think that's a really neat approach to explaining the Trinity from a software developer's perspective. Like maybe you can think about the person, like, because we talk about the Trinity as one God, three persons, and you might say three perspectives, but there are different attributes which are associated with, for example, Jesus, 100% man, 100% God, God the Father, and then the Holy Spirit. They're all God, but they have these different sort of attributes, or theologically they're called persons. But I think from a software developer's perspective, it might be more intuitive to think about it as one super object, right, with these three like tables in different databases, but they all need to interrelate simultaneously, and they're all essential for this abstract super object. All right, I've probably wasted enough of your time at that point. Let me know what you think about that, if that works. Thanks, bye.